Hey gang, welcome to Ozone Late Night. I am joined again by two authors that I am always happy to talk to, Kelly Florence and Meg Hofdahl, the authors of the Science of Book series. I've talked to them before about some of their other books like The Science of Women in Horror, Science of Stephen King, and tonight we're going to talk about their latest release, The Science of Agatha Christie. All right, everybody, welcome to another installment of Ozone Late Night. Joining me for this episode are Kelly Florence and Meg Hofdahl, co-authors of The Science of Agatha Christie, which was just released this past September. Meg is also a horror and suspense fiction writer, and Kelly is a communications instructor at Lake Superior College. You can also hear both of them on their Horror Rewind podcast, where they delve into horror films both past and present. Kelly, Meg, welcome back, I should say, to Ozone Late Night. How are you both?
Good.
Yay!
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, I love being here, so thank you.
I came so close to stumbling in that intro because I did not spell check everything. So where I had podcast, it says post, and where I said delve, it said deliver. So I almost said horror rewind post where they deliver, which would have just been a horrible mangling of English.
You know, we couldn't tell. You were spot on, so you
so
did
rare.
great.
It's very rare when I can do that. I've had Meg, you've been on a couple times yourself, and then Kelly and Meg, you've both been on, I want to say 2 times before, but it might just be 1 time. I can't remember. My memory is well, post-pandemic, everything is shot in terms of time and space,
Right?
so whatever. But I know I've had you on a couple times. My wife, I sent a message, and she said, "Oh, who are you interviewing?" And I said, "The 2 authors." Oh, and she said, "Oh, they have another book out." I said, "Yes, they have another book out. Therefore, they're coming on." So,
Ooh, the 2 authors. I like it.
yeah. Oh no, she knows who you are because like I said,
Love
I'm like,
it.
"Oh yeah, when they have a book coming out, I'll talk to them about it." So,
Yay!
and this is your 6th book, is that correct?
Yeah, our 6th book, and now we have 2 coming out next year. So we're currently working on number 8.
7 is the travel book, or is that considered number 8?
No, that's travel is number 7,
Okay.
and then number 8 is the Science of Alfred Hitchcock.
Oh, interesting. So doing another one on a particular person, because this is the second. Agatha Christie is the second one you've done about a particular creator, right? The Stephen King in this one.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now
So it was time to delve into Alfred Hitchcock, or deliver into Alfred Hitchcock.
Oh, please don't remind
See what
me
I did there?
That was so close. I mean, the amount of times I could count it on less than one hand that I've managed to do an intro that was actually not completely fumbled. So yeah, I should just call this this episode the Deliver episode. But so the Agatha Christie book, because we'll start with that one, and then we'll delve into other things because I heard your most recent horror rewind, so I do want to talk about Evil Dead and Chucky at some point. But we'll get to that. Let's do the book stuff first. Is this because again, this is the second time you focused on a single person. The other son. Well, actually, here, let's do this. In case there are people who are listening who've never read any of the books or have not heard the prior shows, why don't you start out by explaining what I'll call it the Science of series. I don't know if the two of you refer to it that way, but I'll call it that. What those books generally, the approach is, because they have similar themes and kind of a similar formatting. So let's start off with what the Science of books, like what you both try to accomplish with these books where you're delving into either things like women in horror or, in this case, Agatha Christie. What is the kind of general approach for these books?
Sure. So we begin with usually looking at a horror movie or TV show, and then we talk about the history of that show or movie, and then look at the science aspects of it. So the true stories, the real true crime, culture, lore, science, psychology that inspired these fictional monsters. And then when we wrote about Stephen King and Agatha Christie, of course, we focused on the source material, which is their books and short stories. And the same thing that brings in that biographical piece. So what was happening in the world, what was happening in their lives, and what inspired them to create these stories.
And I know that in the book you had mentioned, and I guess this is something that comes up very often, and I'm kind of curious what your opinions are on this, the kind of classic art versus artist problem, where books, especially when books date back, I mean, this is a big problem, or it's a topic. I won't say whether it's a problem or not, because people have different opinions of it, but like when you get into Lovecraft or even Stephen King, depending on which books you're reading and some of the events that happen in Stephen King books, that when you're trying to talk about a creator who might have written or had opinions that are of their time, how difficult is it to wrestle with that? Because I know that you talked about it in the Agatha Christie book. You kind of laid it out right at the beginning to say, hey, this stuff exists and we're not going to pretend it doesn't.
Yeah.
But is that a really difficult thing? Because I know I go back and forth on it. There are times where I go, okay, I have to divorce what the person made from who they were. And then there's other times where it's hard to make that separation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I get really caught up in it too, because I'm a big believer in, not losing art that was created, a long time ago. And I'm big into like preserving what we can. I think the most important thing that we can do, and which is what we did in this book, is we acknowledged it. So we said, Agatha Christie is a woman of her time. And she used words and had certain attitudes that would not be allowed today. They're not appropriate today. And obviously, like Alfred Hitchcock, we're working on that right now. And he as well had some problematic issues. And, when we, for our travel book, we actually went to the Gone with the Wind Museum, which is another kind of big kind of, big fish as far as people kind of commenting on whether this is like still considered art because of how problematic it is. And in our travel book, we made sure to acknowledge the problematic nature of it. So I think for us, it's really about acknowledging it and not trying to hide it and not trying to push it under the rug, and really just saying, listen, this is the reality. And it's we sort of let it be the choice of whoever is reading or watching something to kind of make their own decision. And also, I think going into it and knowing okay, I know that there might be some triggering things for me that are problematic that people wouldn't make today. That's kind of how we started with Horror Rewind too, our podcast. We were like, hey, can we watch these old movies and actually can we appreciate them as women of our time now? And most of the time we can, sometimes we can't. But I think it, like you said, it's a topic and there's not really a right or wrong answer, but I think that acknowledging it is number one.
And Kelly, I'd be curious because obviously in your position as somebody who does communications, is this something that comes up quite often? I would imagine it does. It seems like it's a topic that and I think rightly, I tend to, just in my own opinion, I don't think anything should ever be censored, but I also think that just trying to gloss over it is also a mistake. I think when you don't engage with it, that's just as bad as wiping it out. You have to be able to actually talk about it and kind of figure out where your stance is on it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And in my classes, I have students analyze current and older media, whether it be a TV show or a film, and look at how has communication changed. Even the show Friends, it's not that old, but that has some things that aren't okay that we wouldn't see on TV today. But if we are watching through that lens of, okay, this was a product of this time, we can understand it. Now, as Meg was saying, canceling, somebody and knowing that they're maybe a terrible person, if they were involved in a film, it doesn't make the film bad. Think about all the other people who worked on it and put their blood, sweat, and tears into it, who were probably great people. I think we can still appreciate the art that all of these people worked on and made, instead of throwing it out the window because of one bad person.
Yeah, it does make it trickier when there are times where it seems I won't say easier, but for example, an R. Kelly song is easier for me to say, I'm just not going to listen to that anymore because that's so closely tied to the creator, as opposed to a movie where there, at this point now, it's thousands of people work on films, and it's not that every single person on that film thought that whatever the person who we find out, did something terrible later. It's not like they all were like, oh yeah, that was great. Let's all just keep that going. Generally in many cases they had no idea. So yeah, that's why I think it is a difficult topic to wrestle with. But speaking of communications, I don't want to spend, another 10 minutes on this because it just goes everywhere. But you talk about in the book, the unreliable narrator, which is a wonderful narrative device. The idea of somebody whose perspective is, whether you know it or not, immediately in question. And especially if that's a point of view character, then you have to assess everything that you're being told or being informed by, because it could be diluted or polluted by that person. Is that because from an author perspective, that sounds like a tricky concept to get right. I would imagine that's a tough balancing act. So when you are either doing writing yourself in where you use an unreliable narrator, if you do, or when you read these books, how do you find yourself, because you do these analysis of authors and creators, and then you do obviously the scientific side of it, does it change how a book with an unreliable narrator works for you? Do you find yourself being more analytical about it, or is it something where you can still enjoy it before you knew as much about the mechanics of it, if that's the right word for it, of how they work?
Sure. So my first reading of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, I was about 16, and that is my favorite example of Agatha Christie's unreliable narrator. And I read that book, and my mind was just blown at the end. I was like, oh my gosh, like I did not see that coming. Christie was such a master of tropes, but she was also a master of like subverting what you thought was going to happen too. She'd kind of build these tropes and then tear them down. And this is a great example of that novel. And I read it again, and in preparation of this book. And again, even though I knew that he was the one that we shouldn't trust, the narrator, I enjoyed the hell out of it. And I don't know, for me, I think it's a balance of, when you use that, and I think, it's oftentimes used more in like short form, like short stories. I know I've used it in that way because I think it's a little easier to ask your audience to sort of flip and reverse it when it's been a short story, or, maybe I think mostly short stories is what I've seen. But with novels, hold on, my dog. With novels, it's like, that's a lot of trust that you've built with people. And I think that the only way you can really have that like shock ending is if it doesn't feel like the rug was pulled out from under the reader as far as their trust of that character. So you want to blow their mind, but like, you don't want them to feel like they can't trust you anymore, if that makes any sense. So I think it's a balance that you have to strike. And I think that Agatha Christie was able to do that with aplomb, but not everybody can do it.
And coming from it, from the science perspective, we are all, as humans, naturally born with a truth bias. We trust people around us and we assume they're telling us the truth. And it's not until somebody really betrays us, or, as studies have shown, people go to prison, then that truth bias turns to a lie bias, and you start assuming everybody's lying to you and you can't trust anybody. And so the psychology of that in fiction, is based on truth, and it's fascinating.
And the thing that's interesting is so much of what we judge on people in terms of their communication is also relying on nonverbal cues in many cases, reading a person's face, their tone, whether they're fidgeting or not. And obviously in a written form, you can point those things out, but again, it's hard to qualify is the wrong word. As a reader, I don't think people have enough of an appreciation of how deft you have to be at doing that, because again, if you're watching a movie or a TV show or something like that, there are all these little visual tricks that are employed to make you suspect somebody or to misdirect you or whatever it is. In writing, obviously, you have the visuals of your mind. It's what you're constructing as you read. But that construction comes from the words on the page. So when that's done properly, I think it's a far more impressive feat than, not to say that doing it in a movie is easy or anything like that, but when everything is coming from the page and it then has to go into your mind and be constructed, when an author can do that well, I think that's a more impressive, it just is an impressive feat in general. Would you agree with that?
Well, I was thinking about, like, if Agatha Christie just keeps telling us over and over again that somebody is like doing something really blatantly, it's going to be obvious, right? That like, oh, they keep like, pulling at their earlobe when they're saying something that could be a lie or something. But she has to be more subtle than that. She has to kind of screen it through Poirot or Miss Marple, and she has to make them look smart. She doesn't want the reader to feel too dumb. So she's balancing all these plates, and I think that's what I respect about her. Is if it was in a movie, you can sort of have your actors subtly do things, and then maybe you catch it, maybe you don't. But if it's in black and white in print, it could come off as like, well, duh. So she does such a great job of just balancing all those things and giving us suspense, giving us I don't know who could possibly do this, because that is like the crux of the story, right? If we know who the murderer is like right away, then it's a pretty boring novel.
That's also when we are analyzing these stories, we read the source material, but then go and look at adaptations. And something that I really appreciate about Kenneth Branagh's recent adaptations, especially just this fall, seeing The Haunting in Venice, is that they don't, the actors even know not to give everything away with their nonverbals, because of how Agatha Christie has written them, and then it's been adapted for the screen. They know that they all are sort of stone-faced, and you suspect everyone because it could be anyone.
The Haunting in Venice is an interesting movie to bring up, because I know that there was a bit of a shift in the way that adaptation was done, specifically with the supernatural elements, because my understanding is in the source material, there is no supernatural element of any. Now, I'll admit, I have strangely never read any Agatha Christie. I don't really know why. I just never have. I'm, of course, pop culture osmosis. I know a lot about Christie's work and everything, and of course the famous character. And I have seen the Poirot series, so I guess I've sideways read some of them. But I don't remember what's Haunting in Venice is based on, which one?
On Halloween Party.
Okay. There's no supernatural elements in that, correct? The novel. Right.
And if this is kind of a spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie, but they made it look like it's supernatural, but there's a scientific explanation for what's been happening. So if you have seen the movie, okay, it's all explained by science. So don't worry. They don't.
Well, I will. Stray. My co-host was going up the wall about that because he didn't like the fact that suddenly there was supernatural. He didn't think that was. And I said, well, I haven't seen it, so I don't know for sure. But I had read a synopsis that made it sound like it was supernatural and that there was no ulterior explanation. So that's good. I'll tell him, and now he can. Yeah, and they
definitely sold it in the trailers like that. I think to try to get more of a horror crowd in, and it was great. But it's definitely not supernatural.
Well, that's good. That means he can enjoy it because he likes Kenneth Branagh a lot, as I do, and it wouldn't bother me as much. But he's also a writer, so I think he will be more attuned to changes to source material than I will be. I let a lot of things go that he will not let go, and that's fine. So, Kelly, you had mentioned the science aspect, which, of course, is a big part of these books. And do you find it – actually, I can ask both of you. I shouldn't just ask either of you. But when you are dealing with – because you've done books on – like monsters and more supernatural, as we just mentioned, elements. But this one is based on an author who, as far as I'm aware, only did... Was there any supernatural, anything in any Christie books, or was it all based in or grounded in reality?
There's a bit of witchcraft here and there, and people accused of witchcraft. But Meg, can you recall anything supernatural?
No, I think she likes to kind of play around with the idea of it, and hint at little things here and there, and maybe people's intuitions that maybe feel a little supernatural, coincidences maybe. But no, there's no swamp monster or anything.
So does that make it an easier process because, finding the science of supernatural elements can sometimes probably be difficult, or there may not really be a direct one-to-one correlation. But since we're talking about an author who is, if not completely, then mostly grounded in reality, did that make the research and kind of the way to structure the book easier?
It's the paths that we were brought down with this research. We discovered a lot of personality and communication, detective work, and also crime scene investigation. And then we even did an interview with somebody from the Innocence Project, and talking about how the crime investigation has changed over the decades, and how so many innocent people are now being released because of DNA and everything that exists now. And that was really fascinating to think about, that back in Christie's day, that there were cold cases that maybe could never get solved, and there were people who would go to jail and weren't guilty. But now, of course, technology and science are so advanced.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if it's harder or easier. It's just different kind of research. And I know that, like, since we have done, the science of serial killers, for example, we are pretty well steeped in, like, the sort of real monsters and real things that happen. And so I think we were excited to explore some different things, like the old-timey reference to crime, and the poisons. There's so many poisons, and we were excited to find out that Agatha Christie is very accurate in her poisons. So I don't know if it was harder or easier. It was just a different kind of branch off. And also, being that it was more mystery and not necessarily horror, we got to kind of explore some different avenues, and we've got to sort of get some new readers in, which has been fun too.
I don't think it had ever occurred to me, because like I said, I haven't read any of the Christie the books, but I've seen some of the Poirot stuff. I don't think it ever occurred to me how much poisoning, and you point this out in the book, how much poisoning there is going on. I mean, it seems like it's, and she was a pharmacist's assistant. Do I have that right?
Right. And the fascinating thing is that, she herself, I think, has Poirot and Marple in her, because she was so observant and noticed things, and she ended up saving some lives because of her writing. And then also she caught mistakes that her superiors were making. But everything in her day, they did by hand. They created the tonics and the creams and the medicines. And so she really knew that chemistry aspect, and then became accurate in her writing.
It does make me not trust what pharmacists keep in their pockets. I won't say specifically what that refers to. You can read the book, but it made me go, wonder what's going on behind the counter.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a very good story. And she also got very involved in, Indiana Jones. Why can I not think of the word? What is it? The
archaeology.
That's
Egypt.
it. I kept thinking anthropology, and I'm like, no, it's not anthropology. It's archaeology. That's it.
Yeah.
And that was with her second husband, correct?
Right. Her second husband, that's what he did for a living. And again, like, Agatha Christie just kind of threw herself into it and was like, okay, I'm going to do this now. And, she was not intimidated by traveling in, the Middle East at that time period, often by herself. That's how she met Max, her second husband. She was traveling in what now is Iraq. And she taught herself basically by watching how to do these digs. And so it makes for a really cool, thing that she gets to put in books like Death on the Nile. But also it was a big part of her and her husband's life. And it kind of, and I think she actually ended up even writing some like old Egyptian stories that she put a different name on. She wrote under another name called Mary Westmacott. But yeah, she became really fascinated with Egypt in particular, but all of the antiquities. And I don't know, it makes for a really amazing life. She did so many cool things.
Well, speaking of traveling, that's a segue, and I rarely pulled that one off as well. Let's talk about the travel book, because that is, you said that's the seventh book, so that's the next one. And did you just finish the traveling for that book, or are you still doing that for it?
That one was due already last spring for our publisher, so it is done, and it's coming out in the fall. But we traveled to 12 separate cities in the United States and discovered spooky places that horror fans will love, great places to eat, drink, tour, and we highlight a woman that you should know in every city, either from the past or the present.
And where did that book, was that a book that kind of started evolving in the background? Was that an idea from somebody to say, hey, would you like to do this book? Where did that one come from?
We kind of pitched it because we were like, we travel a lot for, our books. And we tended to want to, we're the goth girls. We want to find like, where's the bar? Like, where's the speakeasy where they have the skeletons set up? Like, where are the haunted hotels? And there really wasn't something for us. And so we wanted to, we were like, this would be a dream job. So we pitched it, and our agent hooked us up with Source Books, which is a great female-owned company, and we are just thrilled. And it was quite a whirlwind doing the traveling. We had to do it kind of quickly. So thankfully Kelly and I are best friends, and we've been best friends for over 20 years. So we could jump from, Oregon to like over to the East Coast, back to the South all together. And, I only got yelled at once by security when I tried to bring on a Lizzie Borden, replica axe onto the plane. They gave me quite a stern talking to, but they let me keep the axe. So
I assume this axe was probably made of metal and wood, like an actual type of axe, just with a dull edge. No?
It's like foam plastic, and they were mad at me, weren't they, Kelly?
Really?
Oh yeah, I guess because it had fake blood on it, but they thought it was inappropriate. But thankfully, she was able to get on. We were able to continue our journey.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they get very strict about a lot of things, and I understand why, but I wouldn't think that a foam prop would generate that. I guess it must be the blood. Or wow.
Yeah.
I never travel with axes of any kind or anything sharp. Oh.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to talk a little bit, because the both of you on the most recent episode that I heard of the Horror Rewind podcast talked about Renfield, which I thought was an absolutely fantastic movie. I loved Renfield. I couldn't understand. The reviews for it that I had read seemed very kind of middle of the road. Nobody really said it was bad, but they also didn't seem that, I mean, I don't read every review that's out there, but I thought Renfield was really good. And I think the two of you enjoyed it too, right?
Oh my gosh. We ended up seeing it separately, but we both had such a great time in the theater, just laughing out loud. And it's so, well, first of all, we love the over the topness of it. We love the gore, but there's also this romance element, and it's so freaking cute.
Yeah, whenever Kelly, like, she'll see a movie and she'll be like, you have to see this movie. You have to go see this movie. And I'm like, okay, well, I know, like, I'm going to have a good time. So I had pretty high expectations going in because Kelly had given it her seal of approval. But yeah, like, it had that sort of Sam Raimi-esque use of blood, and it was delightful. I'm a huge Nick Cage fan. I know people like are kind of, I feel like people feel strongly either way about him. Nobody's really in middle of the road about him, but I love him. And I think he has this like way of sort of making fun of himself, like in a role like that is amazing. And I just, Renfield himself was just like a good, complicated character with, just struggling inside, and then the romance. And I just want more movies like that, please.
Well, there's the other one that he did where he's hired by, where he's, I can't remember the name of the movie, but that was really good too, where he was playing himself and then he's arguing with himself. What is the name of that movie? Oh God.
The unbearable weight of.
Yeah. And then they've got the de-aged version of him yelling at himself is great. That movie was a blast. I thought that was
great.
It was
a blast.
Yeah, he's really kind of swung back up in career-wise, because I know for a while he kind of got forgotten and I don't know what was going on. But now it seems like he's back to, where everybody just enjoys the stuff that he's doing. And I've always liked him too. I've always thought he's actually, when he wants to be a really great actor, he is. When he wants to just play a very maxed out character, he can do that. And I enjoy all of it. I think he's great.
Yes. And now speaking for the 10-year-olds on the planet, I only know because I have a 10-year-old. Nicholas Holt, who was Renfield in the movie, is cute and has nice hair because that's what my daughter says. But
Oh,
I
he's good
agree.
too. I've seen him in stuff too. I like him in stuff too. Everything I see him in
Oh
generally.
yeah, The Menu. He's great. He's
Yeah.
great.
And Warm Bodies, the zombie love
Oh
story.
yes, he's good in that too. Yes.
I have to watch that. I haven't seen that yet. And Evil Dead Rise, it's been on my list, which I'm glad that the both of you liked it so much.
Oh my gosh,
I,
you haven't seen it?
No, I keep, you know what? I fell into, because Criterion added all these really old horror movies like pre-code horror. I've been watching those, like Dr.
Fun.
X and the Island of Lost Souls, because I'm always fascinated by the way horror has changed in some of the, and particularly in some of like Dr. X, if anybody listening, and I raved about this on our show too, it's such a beautiful film because it's a very specific film process that they don't do anymore. I think they call it Technicolor 2 strip. So it's a combination of these very vibrant greens and then almost like a brown orange. So everything has this very specific look. And it's really wonderful because, again, it was a byproduct of experimentation with particular film stock that they had to manually process. So now you could do it digitally, and I'm sure they could, but there's something about knowing that this was something that, in fact, it was lost for years. They only had the black and white version for a long time, and then they rediscovered the prints with this process, and they were able to take those negatives and make this. And it's gorgeous. I mean, you look at it, it's just. And I know that you had mentioned the thing about slapstick and horror, and it isn't happening. And there's definitely that element because there's a reporter character, and he is a total boob. I mean, I don't know how else to even describe the character. He's so almost outside the film, even in his way of speaking, that it contrasts against what otherwise is a really good horror film of its time. But yeah, so I have to get back into the modern stuff because I went way. And I keep saying in my reviews, I'm like, yeah, there's going to be a segment of the audience who says, oh, black and white. Oh, it's in the 40s. I'm not going to watch it. Fine, don't watch it. But that stuff's great. And I love it.
Yeah,
there's something about, and we've written about it, but those old school techniques that are coming back into modern films, like what Jennifer Kent did in The Babadook with the in-camera special effects, and now people are going back to practical effects instead of so much CGI. We love that stuff. We live for it.
Oh, then, and I don't know if either of you have the Criterion channel, but I would at least look at that collection and look at some of the pre-code horror stuff is really good. Because, like I said, Dr. X, Island of Lost Souls, which is a Dr. Moreau adaptation, which is really interesting to look at from a modern perspective, because what they did was there's a woman in it in the advertising they said it's the Panther Woman, which was, I guess, a marketing trick. But they went and they scavenged through all these different actresses to look for somebody who had this exotic look for the time, I'm sure. And she's in the movie. I think she only did maybe 2 or 3 movies, but they build a lot around her. But it's the reason that it would have been banned once the Hays Code came in is because literally the character of Moreau says, I believe the line is, do you know what it's like to feel like God? And you couldn't say the word God. You couldn't say it. You can't, anything that even came close to what could be considered blasphemous was just out. And they mentioned cannibalism, and you can't mention cannibalism because then people might think they're cannibals, and we can't have that. Children, they'll be terrified. And so they, that stuff all went out. There was a list of words, which was later the MPAA came from. But so I have to get back to the modern stuff because, like, I saw Renfield because I knew I wanted to see Nick Cage. But then I dipped into older stuff for a while.
Well, I think you'll enjoy Evil Dead Rise. And what were you going to say, Kelly?
Oh, I was going to say the other one that has come out recently that we highly recommend is called Talk to Me. It's the teenagers with the party game with this petrified hand, and it is terrifying.
Yeah, it's really well done. It's A24. Excellent.
I love A24. A24 is one of my favorite.
Go wrong.
What do they consider? They're not. Are they are they studio? Because they don't. Yeah, they're kind of like a Blumhouse equivalent type, right? Where they fund
they're considered an independent studio, although they make more hit movies than most independent studios. So, and I'm going to give them a plug. They can sponsor this podcast or ours. Their newest TV show they are producing is Nathan Fielder's latest, called The Curse. So I recommend it.
Yeah, I think because A24 was The Green Knight, I'm pretty sure, which was a really interesting movie. And then there was something else. I'm trying to think of what the other one. Is it Midsommar? I don't know if I remember pronouncing that right.
They did Midsummer. Yep,
Yeah.
they did that, and they did Bo Burnham's Eighth Grade.
Oh, and The Witch. They did The Witch too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love A24. I'm very happy to see, like you were talking about, where they're now coming back to practical techniques. I also like the fact that I think there's kind of a resurgence of more independent films where it's not all the kind of same carbon copy thing. I mean, I like big budget, big studio films too, but felt like for a while we were getting into kind of a feedback loop of, these movies are all the same, where it's the same general thing. Even the trailers are identical. It's just, okay. And now it feels like we're moving into a little bit more of and some of that I think is from streaming too, with all this, like the Shudder service and stuff, where you can put these movies out separate from having to run it in 1,500 theaters. You could put it into a streaming service and it can succeed. I like that too, because it means mid-budget, low-budget films are kind of starting to trickle back up.
We're getting so much. And like, this is the worst that a Marvel movie has done this past weekend. And I'm certainly not rejoicing that, because it was female-led, but I think people got really fatigued from all the Marvel movies and TV shows. And I think with the strike happening, the strikes, I should say, I think people are getting more into, how can I independently fund my films too?
Yeah, and we definitely have felt that superhero fatigue over here. I just heard a statistic today that it used to be there were max 2 Marvel properties coming out per year, and now there's 10 with all of the streaming, TV shows and movies, and it's too much, and you feel like you can't keep up. So, like, we haven't seen, I think, the past 3 movies in the theater, and we are definitely not caught up on the TV shows because there's just too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, and I loved all the stuff up through Endgame, and then there was just a point where I think it was just too much stuff, and I went, okay, can we go back to movies where it was one character and we get to know them a little bit, and then we get them together? Does it have to be that we create everything? And I don't want to see them fail either. I don't like seeing movies fail, and there's so much. I grew up reading comics. Marvel has a lot of great characters. I can't wait to see another Blade. I love Blade, so I love the original Blade so much. So it's not that I want to see them suddenly crater, but at the same time, we can scale back a little bit, can't we? I don't have all this time to watch and keep notes so that I can go into the next show and know who's who. I just want to watch something.
Yeah, no one's got time to watch all those shows.
Well, I wanna make sure that we wrap up on time, because I want to be respectful of your time, and we're right where I wanted to be too. So I'm going to remind everybody that The Science of Agatha Christie is out and can be purchased however everybody I think it's because I have it digitally. I'm sure there's physical copies as well, correct? So physical or digital?
Yeah.
So you can go and buy that.
Barnes & Noble and online, Amazon, and you can even order us at Target. So
the book is easily acquired is where I was going with it. So you can buy the book. And then you said that the travel book will be out in the fall.
Yes, as well as The Science of Alfred Hitchcock. So look for 2 new titles coming in 2024.
Oh, excellent. Anything else that you wanted to plug before we wrap up? I just want to make sure I don't forget anything.
No, just everyone, come follow us. We're on all the, platforms, and we love to chit chat about horror and Agatha Christie and all of it. So, we're hard to not find. We're pretty much everywhere.
And I'll just plug quickly, if you are a filmmaker or know a filmmaker of any genre, submit to the Minnesota Film Festival that is held. This is our 3rd annual, and I'm one of the programmers, and we're looking for films. I'm the horror shorts programmer, but we take films of all types. So submit a film to us.
Well, thank you both for coming on, and I'll remind everybody that they do the Horror Rewind podcast, which is that horrorrewind.com or a different address? I didn't note that when I was taking my notes.
That's it. Yep. Okay. That's correct.
So you can go over there to follow the podcast, which I quite enjoy. Like I said, I listened to the one I went, oh, good, Evil Dead's good. Oh, good. Because I can't trust reviews anymore. I mean, people get hung up on the dumbest things. So I have to go to trusted people now and go, okay, I know these people aren't nuts. So if they say it's good, I'll follow it. Well, Meg, Kelly, thank you both for coming on and listening to me ramble for like 40 minutes. And when the next books come out, we'll do this again. Yeah, we'll do this again.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. And everybody, just a reminder, if you want to go and listen to our back catalog, go over to ozonenightmare.com and you will see our archive and everything else where you can hear the previous shows where Megyn Kelly came on and we talked about their other books. And in the future, we'll time travel. You'll be able to go back and listen to the future episodes where their future books come out. And now I'm going to get caught in another TV show like Loki where there is no end. So everybody, thank you for listening, and we will talk to you again on the next Late Night. Visit ozonenightmare.com to subscribe to new episodes or to browse through our back catalog. Follow @OzoneNightmare on Twitter for the latest episode postings and other show information. If 140 characters just isn't enough, you can always email us, theozonenightmare@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, visit our creator page at patreon.com/ozonenightmare. Music for Ozone Late Night is provided by Ogre. Visit ogresound.bandcamp.com to listen and purchase his fantastic selection of music.